ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. بسم الله ابتدأت. اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين والهمنا رشدنا في الدنيا والدين. Alhamdulillah. So he begins Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa sallallahu ala nabiy al-Kareem. إن الله سبحانه وتعالى يقول في محكم كتابه يخاطب هذه الأمة المحمدية بكريم خطابه ثم أورثنا الكتاب الذين اصطفينا من عبادنا فمنهم ظالم لنفسه ومنهم مقتصد ومنهم سابق بالخيرات بإذن الله ذلك هو الفضل الكبير جنات عدن يدخلونها. So he begins his book Sanan al-Muhtadin with this verse, and the book is basically a commentary on this verse from Surah Al-Fatir. The verse says that we have given as an inheritance the book. ثم أورثنا الكتاب الذين اصطفينا من عبادنا, those who we have chosen from amongst our servants. وَيَخْتَصُ بِفَضْلِهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. He gives his bounty to whomever He pleases. You can't question Allah. لَا يُسَأَلُ عَمَّا يَفْعَلُ وَهُمْ يُسْأَلُونَ. You can't ask Allah why He does something, why there's Muslims and why there's non-Muslims, why there's believers and why there's disbelievers, why there's all these different religions, why there's evil in the world. All of these questions, which do in our tradition have metaphysical responses, but in terms of why Allah would allow these things, it's not for us to say. It's for us to accept the situation and then to respond accordingly, because Allah tells us He's going to try us, there's going to be difficulties, and there's responses to any given circumstances that you find yourselves in. We cannot determine, at least not in any unlimited way. We can determine to a certain extent our circumstances. I mean, for instance, we're here, we planned our trip, we have this place, we have an order, all those things we've determined, but you cannot determine the outcomes. So you can do tadbir, which is closer more to takhtit. The reason that, Abu Hassan al-Shadili has a famous saying, إِن كُنْتَ لَابُدَّ مِنَ التَّدْبِيرِ فَدَبِّرْ أَلَّا تُدَبِّرْ. If you have to manage your affairs, manage not to manage them. But it's really looking at the word tadbir, because dabbara means to determine the outcome. The dubr of a shay is the outcome of a thing. We can't do that, right? And the Arabs say, al-insan yudabbir wallah yuqaddir. The human being plans, but Allah determines. So you have your plan and Allah has His plan. Tawfiq is when they're the same for good. Khidlan is when your plan and Allah's plan are in conflict. Right? So tawfiq is when His rida and your plan are consistent. So what he's saying here is that the book has been given to those whom He has chosen from amongst His servants. But then He puts them into three categories. And this is very important because each of those categories is still amongst the chosen. فَمِنْهُمْ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ. He begins with the zalim, the one who's oppressing himself. Because oppression is of two types. You oppress others and you oppress yourself. In oppressing others, you're also oppressing yourself. But there can be things that you simply oppress yourself in. For instance, wasting your time. Because time is such a precious commodity that God has given us. I mean, I shouldn't even use that word commodity, but they do call it in the Arabic tradition, rasmal. It's your capital. It's time is capital, but real capital, real wealth, because you have real wealth and then you have what appears to be wealth. And gold and silver is not real wealth in the spiritual sense. It's real wealth in the material sense. But in the spiritual sense, it could be real wealth if you use it in a way that's pleasing to Allah, or it could be actually harmful for you. So in that way, it's not enriching you, it's actually impoverishing you. And so when he says that we chose amongst our servants these three, the middle one is muqtasid, and he's put in the middle. Allah puts him in the middle because he is, the zalimun li nafsihi is shortchanging himself. The muqtasid is, he's moderate. He's kharatu amalan salihan wa akhara sayya, mixing good and bad. He's between the two. And finally, sabiqun bil khairat is the outstripper, the one who's really taking advantage of life on earth. And those are as-sabiqun, ulaika al-muqarrabun. The sabiqun are the muqarrabun. They're the closest to God. And musabaqa is to vie. Sabiqu bil khairat, vie in virtue. And so the sabiq is the outstripper. Ashab al-yamin, zalimun li nafsi wa muqtasidun. This also relates to the three nafs. Nafs al-amara, nafs al-lawama, and nafs al-mutma'inna. The nafs al-amara, the zalimun li nafsihi, the amara has more influence on him than the mutma'inna, right? If you want modern terminology, the id and the superego, right? You have the id is your shahawat, your impulses, your desires. The id is commanding you, and the superego is not acting appropriately to suppress those urges when they're unhealthy. Because those urges, the source of them is healthy. The appetite, to be hungry is healthy. If you lose your appetite, it's called anorexia, right? You don't have an appetite. That's what it means, literally, anorexia, without appetite. So it's not healthy. Shahwa is healthy, but when the shahwa is determining everything, then it's taken over. And so now the markab is the rakib. So the vehicle becomes the driver, right? Because the shahwa it's to get you somewhere. But once it takes over, it's taking you not to the right place, it's taking you to the wrong place. And so, وَمِنْهُمْ سَابِقٌ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ, but then he says, بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. The reason for that Allah says about the سَابِقٌ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ is so the kibr doesn't get in. That it's by the permission of Allah that you're sabiqun bil khairat. It's bounty from Allah. Because somebody, very often the way shaitan gets in, and for those of you who've read C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, I think he does a very good job at describing how the shayateen can take somebody who is practicing piety and practicing their religion and distort that and fill their heart with pride and give them spiritual diseases. Ibn Ata'illah says, رُبَّ مَعْصِيَةً أَوْرَثَتْ ذُلًّا وَانْكِسَارًا خَيْرٌ مِنْ طَاعَةٍ أَوْرَثَتْ عِزًّا وَاسْتِكْبَارًا. Sometimes a ma'asiyah, an act of disobedience that results in humbleness and brokenness, which leads to tawbah, is better than an action of obedience that leads to arrogance and pride. So one of the reasons why the sins have been decreed for us is to keep us humble and to keep us broken before our Lord. Because if you're outstripping, then you have this danger. And this is why Allah says, سَابِقٌ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَضْلُ الْكَبِيرُ. All to be chosen to receive the book from Allah is the real fadl. ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَضْلُ الْكَبِيرُ. This is the great bounty, the great gift of dunya. It's not to have jah, it's not to have wealth or power or influence. Those can be good things in the world. But the real wealth, the true bounty is to be given guidance and revelation. And then Allah says, يَدْخُلُونَ جَنَّةُ عَدْنٍ يَدْخُلُونَهَا. they enter into the gardens of Eden. All three enter into the garden. يَدْخُلُونَهَا جَنَّةُ عَدْنٍ يَدْخُلُونَهَا يُحَلَّوْنَ فِيهَا مِنْ أَسَاوِرَ مِنْ ذَهَبٍ وَلُؤْلُؤًا. They're ornamented with bracelets from gold and pearls. Right? This is one of the gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives. So they're ornamented with asawira min dhahabin wa lu'lu'a wa libasuhum fiha harir, and they wear fine clothes like silk. And then Allah said, وَقَالُوا الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي أَذْهَبَ عَنَّا الْحَزَنَ. Praise be to the one who has removed grief, sorrow, and sadness from our hearts. Because the nature of dunya is grief, sorrow, and sadness. And this is something that people don't understand. People want to be happy psychologically. One of the things that Aristotle did in his Nicomachean Ethics, which was a foundational book for Muslims in our tradition, because it was Arabized by Ibn Miskawi, and then it was the process of its aslama was through Raghib al-Isfahani, Imam al-Ghazali, who wrote Mizan al-Amal. So, because Aristotle was given a lot of gifts, and he definitely, he was given a hikmah, and the Prophet said, al-hikmatu dallatul mu'min. The wisdom is the lost property of a believer. Wherever he finds it, he has more right to it. And this is why the Muslims were syncretists. Wherever they went, they benefited from the knowledges of the people that they found. Salman al-Farisi taught the trench warfare. The Prophet ﷺ didn't say, this is a Persian bid'ah, we're not going to do this. He said, that's a good idea. People don't understand the trench because Medina was between these two, what they called labatani. Laba in Arabic is lava. Laba. Ba and va are labials. So lava, they were lava tracks. And the Medina had these lava tracks around them, but there was one area that didn't. It wasn't protected because the lava tracks, you can't ride on them, and it's very difficult to walk on them. If you've ever seen the lava tracks in Medina, if you go outside of Medina where they still are, because they've removed most of them, but if you go out, you can't walk on them because they're really sharp and pointed. So Medina was protected, but there was one area that was open, and this is where they built the trench. So they couldn't get around them, and then they were in the trench. Right? And so when but the point of that is, that's another story. The point of that is that Salman was the one that suggested the trench. And the Prophet ﷺ said it's a good idea, and because he saw trench warfare in Persia. And so he took something from another culture, introduced it, and the Prophet ﷺ said, that's useful for us. The Arabs, when they got there, they'd never seen it. They didn't know what to do because they weren't used to that. And the Prophet ﷺ said, al-harbu khud'a, war is deception. That also begins the great treatise on war by Sun Tzu. War is deception. The nature of war is you want to trick your enemy into thinking one thing and doing another thing. So the grief, the point of this is that Aristotle said that grief, that happiness, true happiness, cannot be determined at any point in one's life. Happiness is the sum total of the entire life. To be sa'id or to be shaqi is not determined at any one point in your life. And this is why the Western pursuit of happiness is a psychological state. And this is why they will use antidepressants to get that state. Because they want to be happy psychologically, not realizing that happiness is a spiritual state, not a psychological state. It's a spiritual state of being, according to Aristotle, of being virtuous. In our tradition, of being amongst the people of Sa'ada, which are the Su'ada, are the people. Taha, ma anzalna alayka al-Quran litashqa. We didn't send this book for you to be miserable. Mafhum and mukhalafa, anzalnahu litas'ad. We sent it for you to be happy. فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. Let them rejoice in the book and the sunnah. It's better than what they're gathering from dunya that they're trying to make them happy. Because every pursuit in life is a pursuit for happiness. If you ask somebody, what do you want in life? They say, I want money. Money is not an end. Because you'll say, why do you want money? And they'll say, well, because it'll give me freedom. Why do you want freedom? You can keep asking them that. In the end, they have to come to the conclusion what they really want is to be happy. And that's why happiness is an end in itself. It's not a means to another thing. I'm not happy to fall in love. I fall in love to be happy. I'm not pursuing wealth merely to the pursuit of what, unless it's pathological. Because you can have, like, there are people that are pathological, they're diseased people, they have pathologies, like the miser who collects wealth, he doesn't benefit from it. He's actually poor because wealth is what you use, it's not what you have. Your rizq, there's a khilaf amongst the ulama, but the rizq really is what you use, not what you have. Because you might be acquiring it for somebody else and you don't even know it. So happiness is what we want, but you are going to have difficulties in your life. And that's why you have to be spiritually fortified for them. This is the nature of life. This is a daru ham. It's an abode of anxiety. It's an abode of depression. It's an abode of concern. Right? This is the great noble truth that, the Eastern traditions, that life is suffering. Life is suffering in that the nature of life is its impermanence. And things that are impermanent will never give you true satisfaction. The only thing that will satisfy you in life is what's permanent. And the only thing that is permanent is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why no matter what you're going after in dunya, it's all an illusion that you're pursuing if you're not pursuing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To be in a state of knowing your Lord. Because with that comes happiness. With that comes contentment. And this is why the awliya are the most contented people in the world. Nothing phases them. It doesn't mean they don't have fear. أَوْجَسَ فِي نَفْسِهِ خِيفَةً. They can have fear. It doesn't mean they don't get depressed. The Prophet ﷺ got depressed. We know that he had huzn. When his son died, he grieved. Grief is a human condition. It's not a negative thing. In fact, grief can open up a door that might have been closed before it happened. And Allah will often put grief into your life in order for you to call on Him and come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why you have to embrace that gift. Because if you're a believer, it's a gift. You might not see it, but it is a gift. This is our belief. عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ فَإِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ. Sahih Muslim, Suhaib al-Rumi said, our Prophet ﷺ said, how wondrous is the believer's affair because all of it is good. إِنْ ابْتَدَاهُ صَبَرٌ. If He tries him, if God tries you, He's patient. And if He gives you, He's grateful. Now, there are those who will see the gift in the tribulation, and then that's the highest maqam. قَلِيلٌ مِّنْ عِبَادِيَ الشَّكُورِ. Few of my servants are always grateful. Shakur is always grateful. Right? And what does Iblis want? He wants to make sure that we're not grateful. That's his whole game, is to remove gratitude from your heart. So either you have patience or you have gratitude. But to be in any other state is to be in a dangerous state. And shaitan wants you, he says you will find most of them aren't grateful. That's what he wants, ingratitude. Why? Because he's an ingrate. Kufr means ingratitude. Kufran al-ni'mah. Iblis is an ingrate. And this is why I see Muslims now, they complain all the time. They complain about their hukam. They complain about their social conditions, their economic conditions. It's all complaining. That's all Muslims do. We are the best complainers on the planet. And the thing about complaining, Allah will just give you more to complain about. You want something to really complain about? And then people say, wow, that we thought it was bad then. Look at it now. Right? That's what the Prophet said, the end of time, the fitan turafiqu ba'duha ba'da. Kullu ma nazalat fitan, yaqul mahlakati, mahlakati. I'm finished. And then the next one that comes, it's easier than the first. And this is why, if you're not grateful, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. Right? If you're grateful, I'll increase you. But if you're an ingrate, نَعَذَابِ الشَّدِيد. My adab is fierce. If you want to be ungrateful, I'll give you plenty to be ungrateful about. And that's why gratitude is the best state to be in. The best state to be in is to be in a state of just thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you're in aman, thank God you're not in chaos. If you're in chaos, right, thank God you have iman. At least you have some frame to understand it. Because there's people in chaos that lose their faith. Right? And the idea of losing faith, I mean, may Allah not try any of us with great tribulations, but the whole point of faith, and the new atheists, their argument is that faith is unreasoned belief. For us, it's not. It's reasonable. Our religion is a religion, the Quran is filled with proofs. Look at the dead earth, how we brought it to life. Don't you think we can do that to you? Use your brain. Do you think this all came out of nothing? Do you think you were created for no reason? Right? أَيَحْسُبُ الْإِنسَانَ أَنْ يُتْرَكَ سُدًى? Does he think he's just going to be left without any reckoning? That he can go and do all this horrible stuff in the world? To oppress people, steal their wealth, rape their children, right? Do all these terrible things, and what? Nothing's going to happen to them? So, these three, the ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ, the one oppressing himself, the muqtasid, and the sabiqun bil khairat, they are all part of this ummah, if they're believers. And this is why يَدْخُلُونَ جَنَّةُ عَدْنٍ يَدْخُلُونَهَا. All of them will enter into paradise. Maybe they'll have a period of purification, right? They might have to go through some type of pasteurization, the flash heating, and to remove all the impurities. That's possible. Qala ibn Abbas wa ibn Mas'ud, two of the greatest of the interpreters of our religion from amongst the Sahaba. Al-asnafu al-thalathatu kulluha fi hadhihi al-ummati al-Muhammadiyyati wa kulluhum fil Jannah. All of them are part of the Prophet's ummah, and all of them are in paradise. And that's why don't belittle people. If you see a mubtala, if you see a Muslim who's in tribulation, if he's smoking, drinking, if he still has La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, he's from the ummah. And he has hurma. And the other people are from the ummat al-da'wah. You have ummat al-istijaba and ummat al-da'wah. Sometimes in the hadith when the Prophet says ummati, he doesn't just mean the believers. He means also the people who haven't believed yet. Or the disbelievers, because they're part of his ummah. So there are hadiths where the ulama will actually say, here he's most likely talking about ummat al-da'wah wal-istijaba. Both of them. Because he'll say, my ummah, a'maru ummati ma bayna sittina wa sab'een. The age of my ummah, not just Muslims, non-Muslims, is between 60 and 70. Well, isn't it a coincidence that most life on earth today is between 60 and 70 years? Because previous peoples had either shorter or longer lifespans. The ancients had very long lifespans. But he said his ummah would be 60 and 70. So the majority of his ummah, both Muslims and non-Muslims, will live between 60 and 70 years. قالت عائشة رضي الله عنها. Aisha, now we've got a major interpreter of Islam. دخلوا الجنة كلهم. All of them go into paradise. قال كعب الأحبار. كعب الأحبار is a great Yemeni. He was one of the tabi'een. Some people say he was from a Jewish family. Others say he was actually from his mother was a Himyarite and his father was Persian. There's khilaf about Afwan. I'm thinking about Wahab. Ka'b al-Ahbar was one of the people that knew the Jewish tradition, and he had a lot of knowledge, and a lot of the Israeliyite come from him. The Prophet said, "Hadithu an bani Israel wala haraj." So Ka'b al-Ahbar said, "Istawat manakibuhum wa rabbil Ka'ba." By the Lord of this house, their paths are equal, right? These three, their paths are equal. وَتَفَاضْرُ بِأَعْمَالِهِمْ. But where they're different, they're all going to Jannah, but where they're different is in their actions. So the more action, the higher your maqam. It's like one of the interesting things about the souk of Medina, the Prophet ﷺ, his souk was an open, it was what we would call today like the flea markets in the West, where first come, first serve. He did not allow people to have stalls. It was the first people that got there got the best place. That was the souk of Medina. So the earliest people to the souk got to choose where they set up. And obviously every souk has the best places, and then you don't want to be in the very back where nobody goes. And this is why even today in malls, but depending on the position, you're gonna pay more for your position. Well, this journey to Allah is like this. The first people to get there are going to get, it's like the best hotels, but then when you get there, that's already sold out. You have to go to that hotel. Now, they're all getting there, but it's not going to be the same. So this is the munafasa of khayr, this vying for good. Because paradise there's darajat, there's degrees in paradise. The people that do more here will have more there. But all of it is fawz. If you get in, you've had victory. So no portion of paradise is belittled. It's all fawz. وقال أبو إسحاق السبيعي أما الذي سمعت منذ 60 سنة كلهم ناج. Everything that I have heard for the last 60 years, in other words from the ulama, was that all of them are safe. They're saved. All of them have salvation. وقرأ عمر بن الخطاب هذه الآية ثم قال رسول الله سابقون سابقون ومقتصدون ناج وظالمنا مغفور له. Umar radiallahu anhu read this verse from Fatir, and then he said, Sabiquna, our outstripper is Sabiq. He won the race. He's the first one there. It doesn't mean he's the only one that finished. He's the first one there. Muqtasiduna najin. The second one is najin. He's saved. So he gets the second, third, fourth prize. Zalimuna maghfurun lahu. Right? He might have passed out on the way, but the ambulance comes and takes him to the finish line. Right? He's forgiven. And this is why at the end when it says, Inna Rabbana laghafurun shakur. The end of the verse is our Lord is ghafur for the zalim li nafsihi, shakur, right? Forgiving and grateful. ولا شك أن الراكن لهذا العموم مغرور. But if you rely on this general statement that you're forgiven, then you're deluded. So this is a warning from Sidi al-Mawaq. Don't get deluded. ما لم يقفوا سنن الأئمة المهتدين. If you don't follow the paths of the rightly guided. فقد قال معروف الكرخي, one of the great early righteous people. He was a friend of Ahmad ibn Hanbal's رضي الله عنه. and he was originally from Karh. طلب الجنة بلا عمل ذنب من الذنوب وانتظار الشفاعة بلا سبب نوع من الغرور ورجاء رحمة من لا يطاع حمق وجهل. To seek paradise without actions is sinfulness from amongst the sins. To wait for the intercession of the Prophet without taking any means is delusion. And to hope for Allah's mercy, for the mercy of one that you don't obey, is stupidity and ignorance. And that's why the Prophet said, help me with some portion of the night. You know, he said, help me get you across the sirat. Do something so that I can do my job. You have to do your job so that I can do my job. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وأنا إن شاء الله تعالى أذكر في كتاب هذا أدب هذه الأصناف الثلاثة. So I'm going to make mention in this book the adab of these three categories التي ذكر الله سبحانه وتعالى وأتكلم عليها في 9 مقامات بعضها أو بعضها أعلى من بعض. So I'm going to talk about 9 different stations, مقامات. Some of them are higher than others. أبدأ بالمقام التاسع. I'll begin with the 9th مقام ثم أتدلى and then descend منه إلى المقام الذي بعده to the next مقام إلى المقام الأول and then to the first مقام ثم أرتقي and then I will begin to ascend منه إلى المقام الثاني to the second مقام ثم إلى الثالث the third ثم كذلك إلى المقام التاسع to the 9th أبدأ به وَبِهِ أَخْتِمُ خَتَمَ اللَّهُ لِي بِهِ وَبِمَنِّهِ وَفَضْلِهِ and I will finish it with the highest maqam and then he says خَتَمَ اللَّهُ لِي بِهِ may Allah make this my khatima that I'm in that maqam when I die بِمَنِّهِ وَفَضْلِهِ سَابِقٌ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ بِمَنِّهِ وَفَضْلِهِ. You see, this is the understanding, but through his grace and his bounty. فاذكروا في التدلي المقصود باختصار. I'm going to mention the tadalli I'm going to abridge this. وبالترقي بالبسط والإكثار. But elevation, so the descending ranks, I'm going to not speak a lot about them. But on the ascending ones, I'll speak more about them. اقتداء بصاحب كتاب أدب الدين للماوردي. أدب الدين والدنيا was a book written by the great Shafi'i scholar al-Mawardi, and so he said he's going to use that. قال القلوب ترتاح إلى الفنون المختلفة. Hearts find repose in or comfort in a lot of variety. Like if you talk about the same thing all the time, people get bored. They say the fanatic is somebody who always speaks about, who only has one thing on his mind, right? And he'll never change the subject. It's just the same thing over and over again. Whereas this is, he's saying, I'm going to talk about different things. ذكر حكاية عن المامون. Mamun was the ruler. قال كان ينتقل في قصره من موضع إلى موضع وينشد قول أبو العتاهية. He would move about in his palace from one place to another, and he would recite the verses from Abu al-Atahiyya, was a famous poet that talked a lot about death and لا يصلح النفس إذ كانت مدبرة إلا تنقل من حال إلى حال. That nothing will benefit the soul if it's moving away, in a negative sense, except to change conditions. So if you're going down a bad road, you need to change your circumstances. You need to change your condition. وكذلك قول عياض في صدر مداركه. قاضي عياض wrote a famous book ترتيب المدارك about the great Maliki scholars, and he said in it جمعنا من أخبار أعيان المالكية وسير قضاتهم ونوادر من فتاوى فقهائهم ما يحتاج الحكام إليه ولا غنى للعلماء عنه. So he said, I have gathered in this book stories of the great Maliki scholars, أعيان, the notables, and the siyar, the biographies of the great judges, and also unusual stories, unusual things from their fatwa, the responsi, the legal responses of the jurists, what rulers need and ulama should not be unaware of. Like they need it as well. أثبتنا من مناهج صلحائهم ما ترجى بركاته, and I have confirmed from the ways of the righteous in what we would hope to get from their blessings. فقد قال سفيان عند ذكر الصالحين تنزل الرحمة. Sufyan, the great jurist, said, when you mention the righteous, mercy descends. And so there's important truth about making mention of righteous people. وقال أبو حنيفة الحكايات عن العلماء أحب إلي من كثير من الفقه. That I prefer to listen to the stories of the righteous even more than a lot of fiqh. So the stories of the righteous are very important. وانتقينا أثناء ذلك من ملح آدابهم ما ينشط النفس عند كسرها ويصقل عنها رين صدائها. فقد قال علي رضي الله عنه سل النفوس سعة سعة فإنها تصدى كما يصدى الحديد. And I have chosen from amongst them ملح آدابهم. Mulha, al-Hariri wrote a book called Mulhat al-I'rab. These are like the, like the bon mot in like these clever things that they said, interesting things, witticisms and things that they have said from the adab of these people that will excite the nafs in a good way, energize the nafs, the soul. When it's lazy, it will remove the rust. When the heart gets rusty, because Ali said, give yourselves some entertainment, tasliya, give yourselves some entertainment, because the hearts will grow weary. If you don't have something to lighten things up, if it's always heavy, then you're going to get worn out. وحدثني شيخنا المنتوري. Al-Minturi was one of the great ulama of Andalusia. He's the sheikh of Sidi al-Mawaq, and he comes from a long line of great ulama. Ibn Lubbin was his teacher. This is from the madrasa of Imam al-Shatibi. These are the great maqasidi, fuqaha, and jurists. Going back to Ibn Abdul Barr, Qadi Iyad, Ibn Abdul Barr, Qadi Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi, really truly great giants in our tradition. And he said that Al-Minturi related to me bi sanadihi, in a sanad muttasil, which is the way of our tradition, ila Abu al-Abbas ibn al-Arif. Ibn al-Arif, who died in the early 6th century, was a great scholar from Marrakesh, and he has a famous book called Al-Majalis, which just recently got published. Dr. Ashaq gave it to me. It's a brilliant book about the stations. And so he was sitting with him. Ibn al-Arif was he said, قال كنت في مجلس أستاذي أبي علي الصدفي. Abu Ali al-Sadafi was a student of Ibn Abdul Barr. Ibn Abdul Barr is called Hafil al-Maghrib, one of the greatest muhaddithin in the history of Islam. He knew over 100,000 hadith. He wrote the famous Istidkar, many books. He wrote Fadr al-Ilm. Abu Ali was his student. Ibn al-Arif was learning hadith from this great muhaddith. Now listen to this story. أقرأ علي الحديث. I'm reading hadith with him. فقرأ يوما الحديث ثم أغلق الكتاب. So he's reading the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and then he closed the book. وجعل يحكي حكاية الصالحين. فوقع في نفسي كيف يجيز الشيخ أن يقطع حديث رسول الله ويحكي الحكايات. So he's just thinking in his heart, how could the sheikh leave the hadith and start talking about stories about the salihin? قال فما تم لي الخاطر. I didn't complete my thought. حتى نظر إلي الشيخ شزرا. Until the sheikh looked askance at me. Askance, like, what's up with you? فقال يا أحمد الحكايات جند من جنود الله. Stories are soldiers from the soldiers of God. In other words, they reinforce you. A soldier is to protect you. These are soldiers from the soldiers of God. يُثَبِّتَ اللَّهُ بِهَا قُلُوبَ الْعَارِفِينَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ. This is the way the hearts of those who know God are strengthened and affirmed. قَالَ فَمَا بَقِيَ فِي جَسَدِي شَعْرَةٌ إِلَّا قَطَرَ مِنْهَا الْعَرَقِ. There wasn't a hair on my flesh that didn't start sweating. This is called kashf. فَلَمَّا رَآنِي دُهِشْتُ. When he saw that I was really shocked. قال لي يا أحمد أين مصداق ذلك من كتاب الله تعالى. Where do you find the truth of that in the book of Allah? What he just told him. He said, الشيخ أعلم. The Shaykh knows better. قال قوله تعالى كُلًّا نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الرُّسُلِ مَا نُثَبِّتُ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ. These are the stories of the prophets that we tell you in order to strengthen your heart. And this is for the prophets. Now, the stories of the prophets also strengthen our heart, but prophets are prophets. When we hear the stories of the salihun, we know that we can be like them. We can't be like the prophets. We can emulate to the best of our ability, but we can be like the righteous. And that's why their stories are to us what the prophet's stories were to the Prophet ﷺ. They strengthen our heart. Now, just, you know, when I was first studying with Marabt al-Hajj, my teacher in Tuwaymarat, I was sitting with him, and he had me for the first 3 months. He actually had me. I lived in his tent and slept on the same khabta with him, like on the bed. And I was the only student that I was told that he ever did that with. And then I wanted to go and make my own. He didn't tell me to go. I just started feeling, you know, all the other students were over in the student housing, which were basically little twig huts made from old sacks of rice. So anyway, I was sitting with them, and I was looking at his dara', you know, his robe, and it had a lot of dust on it. It was very dirty. And I was thinking, it just occurred to my heart, an-nadafatu min al-iman. It just occurred to my heart. He was reading, and he closed his book, and he looked at me, and he said, Hamza, سمعت الحديث البذاذة من الإيمان. Have you ever heard the hadith al-badadatu min al-iman? And I said, no. And he said, atadri al-badada? Do you know what badada is? I said, no. He said, jib al-qamus. Go get the dictionary, because he used the dictionary of al-Fayruz Abadi. So I went and got the qamus, and I looked up badada. And it said, having no consideration for the appearance of your clothes. And a few years after that, I was in Medina, and I mentioned that to some people, and one of the people there said, أنا استبعد هذا الحديث. I find that hadith difficult to... And I went to the bookstore, and I saw the book of Kandahlawi, Hujjatullah al-Baligha, and I actually bought it. It's still in my library, and I have the page marked. And I just opened it. You know, I wasn't looking for anything. I opened it, and it said, as for the hadith الطهور شطر الإيمان والأحاديث التي وردت في النظافة لا تنافي الحديث البذاذة من الإيمان. As for the hadiths that are all about cleanliness, they don't negate the hadiths about unkeptness. Because the hadiths about unkeptness are for the Bedouin. Because if the Bedouin didn't have that hadith, they would feel bad because they live in the outdoors, and so the dust gets them all the time. Their floor is made out of dust. They sleep on the earth, so their clothes will get soiled. And so that relates to the Bedouin, which Murabat al-Hajj was Bedouin. But that's an example. When you read these stories, these are real stories. These aren't made up stories. These are real stories that, there's people that, and it's not that they can necessarily read your heart, but Allah will, it can be on their tongue and they just say that thing at that time because that's what you need to hear. And so that's why they say when you're with the awliya, you have to guard your heart. Right? When you're with the salihun. وَلَا نُزَكِّي عَلَى اللَّهِ أَحَدٍ. We don't claim anything about anybody. Allah knows who His awliya are, but نَحْسِبُهُمْ كَذَلِكَ. We think of them that. We have a good opinion of these people. We should really have an opinion of every Muslim is a wali. That should be our opinion, because wilaya, there's wilaya amma and wilaya khasa. Wilaya amma, every Muslim, Allahu waliyul ladina amanu. Allah is the wali of every believer. So every believer is in wilaya with Allah. And those believers could be amongst people that you think are non-believers at the time. So you should even consider non-believers are possibly awliya of Allah. Because you don't know their end. Omar was always a wali of God, even when he was bowing to idols in Mecca. Because Allah's knowledge doesn't change. He doesn't find out something new about Omar. Oh, I didn't know he was going to believe. Allah knows he's going to believe. So he was Allah's friend even when he was in his state of shirk. In the ilm of Allah. In the knowledge of God. So the stories are important, and that's why traditionally they've been recorded and told for this reason. قال الجنيد الحكايات جند من جنود الله. So what he's showing is that Imam al-Sadafi is taking from Imam al-Junaid, because this is the silsila. So he was really quoting Imam al-Junaid, the great scholar who is praised by all. He's an imam by ijma'. Nobody of Ahl Sunnah rejects his imamah. He's called Imam al-Ta'ifatain, the people of outward and the people of inward. He says, Al-Junayd al-Hikayat jundun min junudillah yuqawwi biha Allahu abdan al-muridin. This is the way Allah strengthens the bodies of the believers so that they can do more. وَكَانَ سَيْدِ الْمِنْتُورِ رَحِمُهُ اللَّهِ لَمْ يَزَلْ يُنْشِدُنَا. And then Sidi al-Mawaq is saying, Sidi al-Minturi, his sheikh, would always recite these poems. أُسْرُدْ حَدِيثَ الصَّالِحِينَ وَسَمِّيهِمْ. Tell the stories of the righteous and name them. فَبِذِكْرِهِمْ تَتَنَزَّلُ الرَّحَمَاتُ. Because of mentioning their stories, you feel the mercy of Allah descend. وَحْضُرْ مَجَالِسُهُمْ تَنَالْ بَرَكَاتِهِمْ. Sit in their gatherings, you will get their blessings. وَقُبُورُهُمْ زُرْهَا إِذَا مَا مَاتُوا. And visit their tombs after they die. For the sake of Allah, because it's a ziyarah to a brother for the sake of Allah, right? Or a sister. When I was in Cyprus, I went to visit somebody in Cyprus. Haram is buried there, Al-Ansariya. We went and visited her place. Now, obviously, there are people that call people that do that quburiyun and things like that. The tombs of the salihin, they serve the religion, and you're visiting them out of love for them. You make dua for them. This has been a sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ visited Hamza. He visited the Baqi'. He used to go to Baqi'. He said, "Kuntu anhaakum an ziyarat al-qubur fazuruha." I used to tell you don't visit the graves, because he was worried. But after he knew that they understood Islam, He sent them to the grave to visit them. They remind you of the akhirah. That's a primary reason. But visiting people for the sake of Allah is one of the aspects of our religion. And those who serve the religion, you visit them, because man zara akhan lillah la yazuruhu illa lillah. He didn't la yufarriq bayna al-hayy wal mayyit. But what people do at tombs, there's a lot of munkarat, and that's why people that don't know the adab of visiting a grave shouldn't visit them. I mean, that's part of the problem. Even at the Prophet's tomb, people do things that are incorrect there. You know, and a lot of the reaction of that group against the people of visiting graves comes from genuine problems at grave sites in the Muslim world. There's a lot of bid'ah, there's a lot of munkarat. There's people that go and sit and they tie knots, the nuta, which was a jahili practice at the graves. You know, so these are problems. But generally, if you're in a place and there's righteous people that they call them mazar, then it's good to go and say salam, because we believe they can hear you in the grave. Salamun alaykum ya dar qawm al-mu'minin antum as-sabiqun nahnu lahiqun. He didn't say salamu alayhim. He did kaf and mukhataba. He used the word that you speak to a person who's present. And there's a khilaf about can the dead hear or not hear, but the majority of ulama have always said they can hear. Some of the people say that was a khas of the Prophet when he spoke to the people in Badr in their graves. And the Sahaba asked, can they hear? And the verse in the Quran that you know, la tusmi' al-mawta, you can't make the dead hear. That is about, and even if you read in the context of the ayah, it's about the making the dead of hearts. You can't get the message to them. If their heart is dead, they're not going to hear. لَقَدْ نَدَيْتَ لَقَدْ أَسْمَعْتَ لَوْ نَدَيْتَ حَيَّا وَلَكِنْ لَا حَيَاةَ لِمَنْ تُنَادِي. Like the poet said, you would have made him hear if you were calling a dead person. But the one you're calling has no life. He's talking about dead heart. Because al-qulub tamutu kama tamut al-abdan. The Prophet said that hearts die just like bodies die. وَأُسَمِّي كِتَابِي هَذَا سَنَنَ الْمُهْتَدِينَ فِي مَقَامَاتِ الدِّينِ. I've called this book the path, not sunan, sanan. The sanan, لَتَتَّبِعُنَّ سَنَنَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. You will follow the path of those who went before you. So it's sanan. He said it could be called a tadalli wa taraqi, going up and going down. لأن أوله تدل, it begins with going down. وآخره ترق, and it ends with ascending up. وبالله أستعين, I ask Allah for help. وأعوذ به سبحانه أن أقول في علم بغير علم. And I seek refuge in Allah to speak about knowledge without knowledge, or to act in this religion, أو أعمل في الدين بغير يقين, or to act without certainty. وحسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم وما توفيقي إلا بالله عليه توكلت وإليه أنيب وقصدي الاقتداء حتى في العبارة فلا تعد عبارة من أثق به من العلماء. And my intention here is to follow, even in my expression. So I will use expressions that have already been used by ulama before me. فأفتتح خطابي بحمدة أبي حامد في الإحياء. So I'm going to begin with Abu Hamid's beginning of the Ihya. So he begins the book just quoting directly from the Ihya. Ahmadullah Rabbi hamdan kathira. I praise Allah, my Lord, with great praise. الذي جعل الليل والنهار خلفة لمن أراد أن يذكر أو أراد شكورا. I praise Allah with a great praise, the one who made the night and the day to interchange, alteration of night and day, for the one who wants to remember in it and for the one who wants to be constantly grateful. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد الذي بعثه بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا. Praise be to the one, and prayers, benedictions on our Master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was sent with truth as a giver of glad tidings and a warner. أما بعد, as for what follows. فإن الله سبحانه وتعالى جعل الأرض ذلولا. Allah has made this earth easy to traverse. لعباده ليتخذوها منزلا, so that they would take in it a place where they could alight upon. فَيَتَزَوَّدُونَ مِنْهَا مُحْتَرِزِينَ مِنْ مَصَايِدِهَا, so that they could fortify themselves with what they need in the next stage of the journey. and guard against its traps. وَمَعَاطِبِهَا, and the places where you can be destroyed. وَيَتَحَقَّقُونَ أَنَّ الْعُمَرِ يَسِيرُ بِهِمْ سَيْرَ السَّفِينَةِ بِرُكَّابِهَا. And they realize that life moves with them the way a ship moves with its passengers. We're on a ship. We don't feel like we're moving. I was once, people have heard this story before, but I was once in Arizona, and I was with Sheikh Abdullah Wad Ahmedna, one of the great Mauritanian scholars, the grandson of Murabit al-Hajj, and a first-rate scholar in his own right. He actually memorized Sahih al-Bukhari in my house. We were on one of those electronic walkways that they have in airports. And he'd never been on one before. He grew up in the Sahara. And initially, if you watch people that aren't familiar with them, they're very scared when they get on because it's very weird to get on and have the earth move under you. So we got on, and he was like, "Subhanallah," you know, he's just amazed. And then we're just on it, moving, and he said, "This is just like dunya. You know, you think you're standing still, but you're moving towards the end." And I swear, as Allah is my witness, when we got to the end, there was a sign warning the end comes abruptly. And I translated it for him. I said, "Subhanallah, هذا إنذار النهاية تأتي بغتة." And he just said, "Subhanallah." He said, "أهل الدنيا في غفلة." People of dunya are in ghafla. And so he's saying that it's like you're on a ship. And then he says, أول منازلهم, the first alighting place is al-mahad. We were all in a crib or some type of bed, right, of a baby. All of us that were here, at one point, we begin this earthly journey in a crib. And it ends with the lahad. From the mahad to the lahad, it ends in a grave. And between the two, and then he said, وَالْوَطَنْ الْجَنَّةُ وَالنَّارُ. So this is a journey, and the land you're going to is either a paradise or a hell. One or the other. No third place. وَالْعُمْرُ مَسَافَةُ هَذَا السَّفَرِ. Life is the distance of the journey. And we don't know how long our distances are. We have a relative understanding, but we don't know how long it is. وَالسِّنُونَ مَرَاحِلِ. The years are the marahil. A marhala is the amount of time that it takes to travel in one day, walking, for the Arabs. They call it a marhala. It's from the rihla, yarhalu, rahila yarhalu, to move on a journey. So the marhala is what it takes. It's around, the Malikis say it's around 45 kilometers, about 28 miles. Some say it's 24 miles. Some say, I think the Hanafis have it's longer. But these are classical ways of measuring distance. So the years are like marahil. Ash-shuhur farasikh. The months are like the farsakh, which is a Persian word, parsang, which is another type of measurement. These are Sharia measurements, by the way. And there's a khilaf about how far a parsang is. But it's about 3 miles. The parsang, the farsakh, is the amount of walking that you will do before you'll want to sit down and rest for a little bit. So that's a farsakh. He's saying that's a month. Al-ayyamu amyal, the days are miles. So the mil is the distance before something on the horizon will start dipping. So the mail. In English we call it a mile, but it's from Arabic. The mil is clearly from Arabic. And this was a Sharia category. There's a khilaf about it based on the khilaf of the farsakh. So some say it's 3,000 dhira doing this, or 100,000 isba'. So you can go out, and measure how much. If it's 3,000, then it's about 48 miles, English miles. The Malikis have a khilaf about it. Is it 1,500 or 2,000? They differ on the amount. The Mauritanians go by 32 miles, so the safar with them is 32 miles. Most the Shafi'is, I think, go by 48 miles, and the Hanafis are a little longer. Well, do you know? It's 48 English mile, right? Yeah. So he's saying the mile is like the days. وَالْأَنْفَاسُ خُطُوَاتٍ, and your breaths are like steps. Every breath is a step towards your end. وَالطَّاعَةُ هِيَ الْبِضَاعَةِ, obedience is what you're going to in the souq. It's what you're taking to sell. Right? So your bida'ah is obedience to Allah. That's what you're going to sell when you get to the marketplace, that determines whether you're bankrupt or whether you're rich. وَالْأَوْقَاتِ هِيَ رَأْسُ الْمَالِ, your time is your capital. وَالشَّهَوَاتِ قُطَّعُ الطَّرِيقِ, and your appetites are highway brigands on this journey. They're the brigands on the road that will steal from you your bida'ah. They'll steal your what you have. وَالرِّبْحُ الْفَوْزُ بِلِقَاءِ اللَّهِ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى فِي دَارِ السَّلَامِ, and your profit is having victory with the meeting of Allah in the abode of peace. مع الملك الكبير مع الملك الكبير والنعيم المقيم, with great dominion you're given mulk and you're given great pleasure. فإن كانت خسارة والعياذ بالله, but if you're at loss, may Allah protect us, فهي فوت هذا الربح العظيم, it's the losing this great profit. ويا ليت ذلك كان خاصة بل مع العذاب الأليم, and would that all you did was just lose, but you also get a painful chastisement. في دركات الجحيم, in the descending stairs of hell. فالغافل عن نفس من أنفاسه حتى ينقضي في غير ما يقربه إلى الله زلفى قد عرض نفسه في يوم التغابن لخيبة وخسارة مالهما منتهى. So the one who's heedless of the breaths he takes until they're over, in not using them to draw him near to Allah, he has exposed his soul to being cheated out of this great profit with loss and shame and what those two entail. قال الشاطبي في موافقته ولذلك قهر السلف الصالح أنفسهم تحت مشقات التعبد. And for this reason, وسووا بين الواجب والمندوب في طلب الفعل وبين المحرم والمكروه في طلب الترك وعدوا من لم يعمر أنفاسه بطالا. And for this reason, Ash-Shatibi in his Muwafaqat says, for this reason, the early community, the righteous Salaf al-Salih, they conquered their souls and put them under the difficulties of doing a lot of ibadah, and they considered wajib and mandub to be the same, and in doing good, and they considered the muharram and the makruh to be the same in avoiding it. And they considered that the one that did not fill his breasts with good was useless. If you weren't doing good. قال علي وقال على هذا وقال علي هذا نبه حديث الندامة وقال وعلى هذا نبه حديث الندامة. The Arabic has its little tricks in there. وعلى هذا, and upon this, نبه حديث الندامة. The hadith about nadama is reminding us يوم القيامة يندم المحسن ألا يكون أزداد ويندم المسيء ألا يكون نزع. On the Yawm al-Qiyamah, the one who did good will regret that he didn't do more, and the one that did evil will regret that he didn't decease from it. قال السحنون, the great Maliki scholar, رأيت ابن القاسم وغيره فما رأيت مثل عبد الرحيم. I saw Ibn Qasim and I saw others, but I didn't see anybody like Abd al-Rahim al-Rib'i. He was called the Zahid, very pious man. Sahnun said about him, I knew the outward of the others, but I knew his inward. There's a story that Sahnun used to always ask Ibn al-Qasim for dalil, right? And one day they were sitting on a pier, and Ibn al-Qasim was sewing something, and he dropped the needle, and a fish came up with the needle in his mouth and gave it back to him. He said, after that, I never asked him for dalil. You know, the Malikis never asked for dalil in fiqh. And this is why if you read the Mutawwana, Malik had two majlis. He had the majlis of hadith and the majlis of fiqh. The other madhabs tended to focus on dalil in the fiqh, but Malik didn't. He saw fiqh and hadith were two separate sciences. Fiqh was the istinbat. And his students, he expected them to know the hadith. So it's not that they didn't have dalils, but he didn't mix them. And traditionally, the fuqaha were often not great muhaddithin. Some of them were. Malik, out of the four imams, is the only one to be considered at the highest rank of hadith. Ahmed is a muhaddith and a faqih, but he's of a lower rank than Imam Malik in hadith. Imam Shafi'i was a muhaddith and a faqih, but he's lower than Ahmed in hadith. Abu Hanifa was a muhaddith. They were all muhaddithun. But their rank was not the rank of Malik. Malik had the highest rank of his generation in the hadith, which is why Imam al-Bukhari considered the silsila dhahabiyya, the soundest chain, the golden chain, was Malik an Nafi' an Ibn Umar. If he found that, he didn't consider there to be a higher chain in hadith. But they're all muhaddithun, all of them. ومن كلام السحنون انظر أبدا الأمرين يكون فيهما الثواب فأثقلهما عليك هو الأفضل. Always look, if you have two things that you're deciding about, look at the reward. And the heaviest one on you is the best. Now there is a hadith, ما خير رسول الله, Aisha رضي الله عنها said, ما خير رسول الله بين أمرين إلا اختار أيسرهما. He wasn't given a choice between two things except he chose the easier of the two things. And there's a lot of different interpretations about what that hadith meant. But there's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ told Aisha, al-ajru ala qadr al-nasab. You know, the reward is in how much you exert yourself in a thing. So there's a lot of reward. Reminding yourself that your body has a right as well. But Sahnun was somebody who practiced. One of his students said about him, he said, كان كلامه لله إذا أراد أن يتحدث كان يسكت وإذا أراد أن يتكلم وإذا أراد أن يسكت كان يتكلم. That if his nafs wanted to speak, he would go silent. And if his nafs wanted to be silent, he would speak. So he was doing riyadha, you know, tarbiyah. He was doing that, and that's a level of awareness about, because the speaking is very dangerous. The tongue is, I think Dr. Omar's talking about that in his class. And then ثم نقل عنه أنه قال زيادة الإخوان نقص من العمل. Having too many friends, Facebook people, listen up. Having too many friends will waste your time. It's going to diminish your ability to do good deeds. You know, and I tell you, this is an age where Iblis, man, he has tools he's never had before. People could not backbite if they were alone. Not that long, you couldn't backbite if you were alone. Now, you can backbite all the time. You know what so-and-so did? Really? Wow, what an idiot. Yeah, LOL, you know. They're all doing it, just saying things. They sit, now people in the same circle will say things about somebody in the very circle. So it's a new type of backbiting because they're present, but they're unaware that you're saying something about them. Like, what an idiot. Click. It goes to them and they're, snicker, snicker. Yuck, yuck. قال المحاسبي تبدأ في أوامر الله بالأوجب فالأوجب والأفضل فالأفضل. Imam al-Muhasibi, one of the great people of Tazkiyah, he was also, Ahmed spoke very highly of him. He said, in the commands of Allah, always begin with the most awjab, fal-awjab. In other words, triage. The most important, always do those first. Always pray the fard before you do any nafila, unless the nafila precedes the fard. Like for dhuhr, you have 4 before. But always, if you haven't prayed dhuhr, and it's dhuhr time, don't think about doing some other act of goodness. And then, wal afdal fal afdal, do the best and then the next best. فَإِن لَمْ يَتَبَيَّن لَكَ فِي أَمْرَيْنِ أَيِّهِمَا أَفْضَلْ. And if it's not clear to you in the two matters which one is better, وَأَوْجَبْ فَأْتِ الَّذِي هُوَ أَثْقَلُ عَلَى قَلْبِكَ. If you can't determine which one is more of an obligation, then do the one that's heaviest on your heart. فإنه لا يؤمن عليك أن تعمل العمل الذي خف عليك لهوى نفسك. Because you're not safe from your hawa, you'll want to do the easier one on your nafs, right? So the nafs will trick you into this, you should do that first, but it's really, it just wants to get out of doing the other one. فإن استوى الأمران فلم تقدر فلم تقدر أن تعرف أثقالهما أو أخفهما فليعرض نفسه حينئذ على الموت وهو مقيم عليه وعلى أيهما يحب أن يأتيه الموت. If he still can't decide, then think about, you're going to die right away. Which one would you rather have in your mizan? If you could only do one before you die. That's another way of looking at it. فإن النفس المؤمنة وإن كانت غافلة عاصية لا تتمنى لقاء الله ولا تحب إلا على الخير والصافي. Because the nafs, even though it's in heedlessness and it's disobedient, it doesn't want to meet Allah unless it's in a good state. الذي ترجو أن ينجيه من عذاب الله سبحانه وتعالى لأنه لا هون لها عند الموت في الدنيا إنما هواها في الدنيا للحياة ما دامت حياة. Because there's no hawa about death. The hawa is about things in this world. قال أبو حامد إمام الغزالي وكل نفس من أنفاسك خاتمة إذ يمكن أن يكون الموت متصلا به. So every breath that you take could be your last, because death will be in one of those breaths. انظر وعلى فرضا أنه ليس بآخر نفس. So think about this hypothetically, that it's not your last breath. فقد قال أرباب القلوب ما من نفس تبديه إلا وله قدر فيك يمضيه. So no breath will come from you except that it's been decreed that you will finish it. يجب عليك أن تصرف ذلك النفس في طاعة مولاك. So you should use it in the obedience of Allah. وترضى بما يرد عليك منه وإن خالف هواك. And be pleased with what you do from it, that it's going against your passion or your desire. فإن صوفت هذا النفس لنفس آخر, if you procrastinate this nafas thinking that you have another breath, ذهب هذا النفس وسيلحقك عليه الأسف. You will lose that breath and you will regret it down the road. قال تاج الدين لا تترقب فروغ الأغيار فإن ذلك يقطعك عن وجود مراقبة له فيما هو مقيمك فيه. وقال إحالتك الأعمال على وجود الفراغ من رعونات النفوس. He's saying that putting off actions based on this idea that you're going to have leisure time to do it is one of the blemishes of the soul. وانظر, and you're doing Ibn Ashir now. One of the things Ibn Ashir says, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ رَصَدِ الْآفَاتِ حُبُّ الرِّيَاسَةِ وَطَرْحُ الْآتِ. That the root of all of the sinfulness is love of leadership and putting off what's coming, procrastination. And there's a hadith, التسويف شعار الشيطان. Procrastination is the Satan's slogan. You got time, don't worry. Be able to do it. Somebody asked Sahal bin Abdullah Tusturi, متى يستريح الفقير? When will the poor one get repose? قال إذا لم يرى غير الوقت الذي هو فيه. When his time runs out. Because the hadith says, المستريح والمستراح منه. انظر هذا مع الذي قالوه إنه هو التصوف أن يكون في الوقت فيما هو أولى في الوقت. It's been said that tasawwuf is simply to be doing at any given time the most appropriate thing for that time. And this is why there's a famous statement of Sufi ibn waqtihi. The Sufi is the son of the moment. In other words, he or she is aware of the moment that they're in and the preciousness of that moment, and that it could be the last moment. And so they're always doing what is best at that moment. وقال تاج الدين في حكمه, so Taj al-Din in his the Hikam al-Ata'iyya, Ibn Ata'illah said, حقوق الأوقات لا يمكن قضاؤها إذ ما من وقت يرد إلا ولله فيه عليك حق جديد أو أمر أكيد فكيف تقضي فيه حق غيره وأنت لم تقضي حق الله فيه. The rights of times, of specific times, you can never fulfill them. Because there's no time that comes except God has in it a new right and a confirmed matter. So how could you complete the rights of other than it if you can't complete the haqq of Allah in it? So you have to do your best. قال عياض كان مالك لا يراه أحد من أهله ولا من أصدقائه إلا متعمما لابسا ثيابه لا يضحك ولا يتكلم فيما لا يعنيه يقول لا يكون العالم عالما حتى يكون كذلك حتى يحتاط لنفسه بما لو تركه لم يكن عليه فيه إثم. قاضي عياض said Malik لا يراه أحد من أهله ولا من أصدقائه إلا متعمما لابسا ثيابه. Nobody, even his own family members or his friends, ever saw him without his turban on and dressed properly. He didn't laugh a lot, and he never spoke about what didn't concern him. And he used to say, a scholar is not a scholar until he's like that. حتى يحتاط لنفسه, that he is careful about his soul. بما لو تركه لم يكن عليه فيه إثم, that if he left it to its own devices, it still wouldn't be sinful. His soul is under control. Any Oh, I wanted to just, go ahead. I wanted to, they had a border incident. May Allah protect this country. I want to mention something. We're living in a time where you have these people, we're living in a time when you have these mad people doing crazy things, killing indiscriminately. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man qatala tahta rayatin ilmiyyatan aw ummiyatan." Whoever fights under a blind flag, وَمَاتَ مَاتَ مِيتَةٍ جَاهِلِيَّةٍ. Sahih hadith. You fight under a blind flag. In other words, you don't know who you're really fighting for. When you die, it's a jahili death. These are blind flags out there. People doing all this. So we don't know who they are. We don't know who's involved in these things. And in the same hadith, it says that they don't distinguish between innocence and guilty. which is the essence of terrorism. You can't blow people up. You go into a place and just kill people. And Muslims would never have done that. This is a completely really demonic thing. Now, the hadith in Sahih Bukhari, which is related by Imam al-Bukhari to the from Abdullah ibn Muhanna. It's related by Hudayfa ibn Yaman, who knew a lot about the end of time. He was very interested in the end of time. He relates a lot of hadith about the end of time. The hadith is inside Bukhari. And Hudayfa said, كان الناس يسألون رسول الله عن الخير وكنت أسأله عن الشر مخافة أن يدركني. That people were asking the Prophet about good, but I asked him about evil, out of fear that I might find it. So he said, Ya Rasulullah, قلت Ya Rasulullah, كنا في جاهلية وشر فجاءنا الله بهذا الخير فهل بعد هذا الخير من شر? O Messenger of Allah, we were in Jahiliyyah, this age of zealot ignorance, and evil. So, is after this evil, is after this good, and then God brought this good to us, is after that good any evil? And the Prophet said, نعم. قلت وهل بعد ذلك الشر من خير? Then is there good again after that evil? He said, نعم. وفيه دخن. Yes, but it will be tainted. Will have like the effects of like a fire. When a house gets on fire, you get the soot that's on the wall. It will have the effect of. And then he said, ما دخنه قلت ما دخنه يا رسول الله. What's this soot? And he said, قوم يهدون بغير هدي ويستنون بغير سنة في رواية. People that will guide with other than my guidance. And who that can be used, Ibn Abi Jamrah says it can be used for balala or for good or evil. The word has yahdiyah al-jahim that can lead them to it. Just means to lead, but generally it means good, guide, huda. يهدون بغير هدي. تعرف منهم وتنكر. You will know things from them and other things you won't know. And these are all the groups that came in to Islam. They definitely have a lot of things from Islam, but then they have things that aren't from Islam. So you'll know things and other things you won't know. And then, so then he said, وَهَلْ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ الْخَيْرُ مِنْ شَرٍ? And then is there evil after that good? He really wants to get to the end of this. Hudayfa, is there evil after that good that has dakhan in it? He said, نعم. دعاة على أبواب جهنم. Preachers on the doors of hell. من أجابهم إليها قذفوه فيها. Those who respond to them, they will fling them into hell. قلت صفهم لنا. Describe these people to us. هم من جلدتنا. They're Arabs. They're من جلدتنا. They're the same as us. يتكلمون بألسنتنا. They're going to quote our words. هم من جلدتنا. يتكلمون بألسنتنا. They will speak using our language. دعاة على أبواب جهنم. They're callers to the gates on the gates of hell. If you respond to them, they will thrust you into hell. And then Hudayfa رضي الله عنه, كيف تأمرني إذا أدركني ذلك يا رسول الله? What should I do if I see that? قال عليك بجماعة المسلمين. عليك بجماعة المسلمين وإمامهم. Follow the jama'ah and the imam. Right? The sultan, authority. قال وإن لم يكن Amazing. Alhamdulillah. What if there's no Khalifa and no Jama'ah? فاعتزل تلك الفرق كلها. Then avoid all the sects. وإن تعض على أصل الشجرة حتى يدركك الموت. Even if you have to cling to the root of a tree until death comes to you. And don't be deluded by any claims of Imam and Jama'ah, because the Imam of the Muslims is one thing, and there has to be a consensus. I mean, this whole idea of Sayyidina Umar said, if anybody claims to be caliph, la tubay'ahu, don't give him bay'ah. That's in al-Bukhari. He said, if anybody claims to be caliph, don't give him bay'ah. I mean, I could declare do that. Really, I'm caliph, you have to take bay'ah with me. I'm from California. Land of the Khilafah. It actually is from Arabic. Did you know that? Yeah. There was a Spanish novel about the land of the caliph. It was called California. Yeah. It was a 16th century Spanish novel. The Spanish, when they got to California, named it after this novel. So it really is the land of the caliph. I'm not, that's a historical fact. So this hadith says, you're going to have bad rulers. مَا يُصْلِحَ اللَّهُ بِهِمْ أَكْثَرُ. But their good outweighs their evil because they bring order. إِنْ أَحْسَنُوا لَهُمُ الْأَجْرُ. Whatever good they do, they have the reward. وَعَلَيْكُمُ الشُّكْرُ. And be grateful for it. See, all people do is ever complain about these rulers. They don't think about the fact that they actually have roads in their countries. They have the toilets flush. That's a great blessing to have amenities. I mean, I was on a flight once, and there was somebody from one of the Arab states. I won't say which one it was, and I asked him why he liked the Emirates. Yeah, I said, because the Emirates. He said, yeah. I said, do you like it? He said, yeah. I said, why? He said, because they serve their people, which is true. And I said, what? And your government doesn't serve your people? He said, they don't do anything for us. I said, don't you have roads? He's like, yes. Who does that? The government. I said, do you have amenities in the Marafiq? In Arabic, we call Marafiq. Who brings the water to your house? Who desalinates it? It's like people don't think. So he's saying, be grateful for the good they do. Right? And if they're, whatever wrong they do, they have that sinfulness, and you should be patient. This is our tradition. People don't want it. We don't want all this revolution. Well, welcome to it. Welcome to the revolution. I hope everybody's happy. All these millions of people that have lost their homes, and all these children, and all these bombs and destruction. And this is revolution. This is what happens. People say, well, how do we get rid of the injustice? The Quran says, it's pretty clear Quranic narrative. Change your souls and Allah will change your condition. But if you want to change your conditions without changing your souls, then it'll never be. It will never be. Not going to happen. People they say, no, we have to change the top. No, our tradition is you change the bottom and Allah will change the top. But if you try to change the top, then He's told us not to go against rulers, so let them be forewarned. If they go against His message, right? They will be afflicted with civil strife, right? Or a painful chastisement, right? And that's Quranic narrative. ways in which we can balance our happiness in this dunya that comes from our families, careers, etc., and our spiritual connection to the eternal. Alhamdulillah, I think everybody knows that there's a lot of blessings despite the tribulations. There are many great blessings. Family is one of them. Health is another. Friendship is another. All those things are blessings that should make us happy. But the point of this is just to realize that this abode is not an abode of happiness by its nature. It's not the nature of the abode. It's darul bala. It's the abode of tribulation. Imam al-Junaid says, إذا توطن نفسك على أن هذه الدار دار بلاء, right? If you accustom yourself to know that this abode that you're in, dunya, is an abode of tribulation, he says, تعبك راحة, right? وشغلك فراغ. Your exhaustion will be repose, and your preoccupation will be leisure time. You know, alhamdulillah. Everybody, we all have our tribulations. Nobody here doesn't have tribulation. I guarantee you, there's nobody in this room who doesn't have tribulations in their life. Nobody. But the bounties of Allah are greater than any of the tribulations we have, no matter how hard they are. And Ibn Abbas said, whatever tribulation you're in, it could be worse. If you lost one eye, you could have lost two eyes. If you lost one arm, you could have lost another arm. If you lost your husband, you could have lost your whole family. And he said that is a source of gratitude. You know, just that it could have been worse. And عَسَى أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. Maybe you dislike a thing and it's good for you. وَعَسَى أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌّ لَكُمْ. And maybe you want something, but it's not good for you. وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah knows and you don't know. So let Allah choose for you. Don't choose for yourself. I didn't get that job. I'm so disappointed. Maybe that job would have taken you away from your deen. You know. You don't know. Even losing family and things like that, you don't know if it's better for them. Could be a rahmah for them. What would be the purpose or need to do something our Blessed Prophet did not do, considering that he said what is not from me, and keeping in mind the great love and care of our Prophet for his ummah, would he miss out from telling us that which is beneficial for us? Everything that he told us, everything was beneficial, either by its genus or by its species, either by the jins or by the naw'. So there's nothing of good that you can do that, you know, I mean, I was saying to somebody, you know, there's nothing new. There's nothing new. Like a car is just a new way of moving, but we've always moved. It's just a new way of moving. He said, what about FedEx? And I said, well, like you had carrier pigeons, you know. They used to, do you know about the cherries? The ruler in Egypt, he wanted cherries, and they were in Sham. So they sent the pigeons, they would tie the cherries to the pigeons, and they sent them, and they would, like that. One of our Muslims in America has that fruit company where he sends fruit in the mail. But edible arrangements. So everybody, if you're in America, you should use his service. He supports State Tuna, so. Yeah. The more he makes, the more he gives. It's good, you know, to support Muslims. Is that it? No other question? Time's up. Good.